All right, let's get right into another deep dive today. And, something we're going to be looking at today is navigating this whole career advancement thing, especially, in a hybrid work environment. I think a lot of people listening are probably, working from home at least part of the time.
Yeah.
And, kind of wondering, like, is this hurting my chances of getting promoted?
Right.
So to kind of really get into this, we've got some recent surveys we're going to look at, some expert opinions.
Yes.
And, all this is coming from, like, the U.S. and Denmark, so it's kind of a global perspective.
Yeah, definitely a timely topic because I think there is some tension brewing right now.
Yeah.
Between the flexibility that so many employees are looking for.
Right.
And then also, these traditional measures of success.
Exactly.
That companies have always relied on.
Like putting in the FaceTime and all that.
Right.
So, yeah. Let's jump right into it.
Yeah.
One thing that really jumped out at me, like right away, was this statistic from Robert Half.
Yeah, okay.
They're a recruitment firm, and they found that 70% of employers are actually more likely to promote employees who are in the office every day.
Okay.
So, I mean,
That's a big number.
Yeah, it's a huge number.
It's not, honestly, it's not entirely surprising.
Okay.
I think, when you think about managers.
Yeah.
And, their concerns about, maintaining visibility and connection with their teams.
Yeah.
When not everyone's in that same physical space.
Right.
It kind of makes sense.
So it's not really like anti-remote worker,
Right.
But it's more like.
Well, yeah, I mean, how do you as a manager,
Yeah.
Right? How do you build that rapport?
Right.
Mentor someone.
Yeah.
Or even accurately assess, like, their workload.
Yeah.
When you're not interacting with them.
Right.
Face-to-face regularly.
It makes sense. It's almost like the playing field.
Right.
Kind of tilts in favor.
Yeah.
Of the people that are physically present. And I feel like that's kind of backed up by this, this hard data from the Wall Street Journal.
Oh, okay.
Their analysis found that employees who primarily worked from home last year were promoted 31% less often.
Wow.
That's huge.
It's a big difference. Yeah.
Yeah, and it makes you wonder, like,
it does.
Is it because managers just aren't seeing them as much?
Yeah, I mean, it really kind of highlights the power of perception.
Yeah.
Because even if you're, like, knocking it out of the park.
Right.
If your manager's not, like, seeing that effort.
Yeah.
Or, feeling that connection.
Right.
It can really impact. Subconsciously their evaluations.
Yeah.
And, it's interesting. You use the term proximity bias before and.
Oh, yeah.
I think that's very related to this.
Yeah.
Because it is this proximity bias issue.
Yeah.
Where, people that are physically closer are just perceived more favorably.
Right. And in the research, I kept seeing this phrase over and over again, out of sight, out of mind.
Right.
I feel like those are kind of the same thing.
Yeah. I mean, they're closely related.
Yeah.
I think, out of sight, out of mind speaks to our human tendency.
Yeah.
To kind of forget about.
Yeah.
Or maybe even undervalue.
Right.
Things that aren't right there in front of us.
Yeah.
And in the context of work, it's like, if you're not physically there.
Yeah.
You run that risk of your contributions being overlooked. Or even forgotten about.
So even if you're like, oh, rock star.
Exactly.
If you're not showing your face enough, you could get passed over.
Right. Unfortunately, that's a possibility.
Yeah.
But it's not, it's not entirely about just showing up.
Okay.
It's more nuanced than that.
Right. So what else is going on? Because this one article from resumetemplates.com was saying it's not just about being seen. It's about being known.
Right.
Within the company culture.
Mm-hmm.
So what does that even mean?
Yeah, it's like understanding the unspoken rules of the game.
Yeah.
The networks of influence, how decisions really get made within the company.
Right.
And sometimes, that happens outside of formal meetings.
Yeah.
Or project updates.
You mean like those informal interactions?
Right, exactly.
Like catching up in the break room or, whatever,
right.
having lunch.
Yeah.
All that stuff.
Exactly.
That happens when you're all in the same place.
Right. It's about, building relationships, understanding the company dynamics.
Right.
And, being part of those, those spontaneous conversations where ideas are shared and connections are made.
Right.
And that can be harder to replicate.
Right.
When you're working remotely.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it feels like remote workers are kind of at a disadvantage.
Yeah.
They want that flexibility, but it also sounds like
Yeah.
they could be getting passed over
Right.
for promotions.
Yeah, I think so. So how do you break through that?
Right. Like how do you get around that?
Well, the good news is there are, there are definitely strategies that you can use
Okay.
to combat this proximity bias.
Okay.
And, the research that we looked at
Yeah.
had some really good, practical advice.
Okay, well, let's hear it. I'm sure our listeners want to know.
Yeah, so one of the biggest recommendations was around communication.
Okay.
Don't let it slip just because you're not physically in the office.
Okay.
Make a conscious effort to stay connected
Right.
with your colleagues.
Yeah.
And most importantly, your manager.
But I mean, shouldn't that be happening anyway?
Mm-hmm.
Through all the project updates,
Yeah.
the emails and all the meetings.
Yeah.
Why is it so important to I don't know, go above and beyond?
Well, it's about being more intentional about it.
Okay.
Don't just rely on the formal channels. Schedule a regular video calls
Yeah.
with your colleagues, not just to discuss work tasks, but to catch up,
Oh, yeah.
on a personal level.
So it's kind of like replicating those water cooler moments
Yes.
virtually.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. You got to make the effort to build those relationships
Right.
and stay top of mind,
Yeah.
even when you're not physically present.
So you're basically creating your own
Mm-hmm.
opportunities for visibility and connection.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, and another thing that's really crucial is sharing your accomplishments
Okay.
proactively.
Okay.
Don't assume people are just going to automatically notice
Right.
just because it's listed in a project report
Right.
or mentioned in some team update.
So it's tooting your own horn a little bit,
Mm.
but in a way that's authentic.
Right.
Not bragging, but just making sure people know.
Exactly. Find those opportunities
Yeah.
to highlight your wins
Yeah.
and, showcase your value in a way that feels natural.
Right.
Maybe it's during a team meeting when you're discussing a project update, or
Yeah.
maybe it's a one-on-one with your manager
Okay.
where you can elaborate on your accomplishments.
It sounds like remote workers almost have to become
Yeah.
their own PR agent.
In a way, yes.
Yeah.
You need to be strategic about how you're presenting yourself
Yeah.
and your work,
Yeah.
even when you're not physically there.
Right. So any other strategies that we should be thinking about?
Another really important tip is, seek feedback.
Okay.
Actively seek feedback. Don't wait for your manager
Yeah.
to initiate performance reviews
Right.
or even, just regular check-ins. Take the initiative
Okay.
to schedule those feedback sessions.
Yeah.
And, demonstrate that you're engaged. You value
Yeah.
input and you're committed to growth.
So it's showing you're not just
Yeah.
at home on the couch,
Exactly.
doing the bare minimum,
Mm-hmm.
but you're really trying to.
You're invested.
They're invested. Yeah.
Yeah.
You mentioned this global trend
Mm.
of proximity bias. And, the research we looked at came from the U.S. and Denmark.
Yeah.
Did the research from Denmark have any, specific insights into how they're dealing with this?
Yeah, the article we looked at really, really emphasized clear communication
Okay.
and setting expectations
Okay.
from the very beginning.
Oh, okay.
They highlighted that companies need to establish clear guidelines
Yeah.
and procedures for remote work.
Yeah.
Including, how performance is measured,
Okay.
how career progression is handled.
So it's about, creating a level playing field
Exactly.
where everyone knows,
Mhm.
what the rules are.
Yeah, everyone understands how success is defined.
Yeah.
Right. And that requires a shift in thinking, really,
Okay.
from both managers
Yeah.
and employees.
Okay.
Managers need to move away from simply rewarding face time
Right.
and actually develop systems that can accurately assess, contributions,
Mm-hmm.
potential, regardless of location.
Yeah.
And then employees, especially remote employees, need to be, more proactive
Yeah.
about communicating their value,
Right.
making sure their contributions are recognized.
So it really is
It's a two-way street.
yeah.
And it leads us to a really important question
Yeah.
that I think we need to consider as we navigate this new world of work.
What's that?
How can companies adapt performance evaluations and promotion processes
Right.
to make sure it's fair,
Yeah.
in this hybrid environment.
Because if some people are getting ahead simply because they're in the office more,
Right.
that's a problem.
That's a problem.
Yeah,
We need to find a way to level the playing field.
we do.
And I think that starts with acknowledging
Yeah.
that there is a potential for bias
Right.
and having those open conversations about how we can create a more equitable system
Yeah.
that values contributions and potential no matter where you're working.
And I feel like this goes beyond, just like
Mm-hmm.
tips for remote workers.
Right.
It's companies.
bigger.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They need to rethink this whole
Yeah.
approach to performance management.
It's a challenge
Yeah.
that requires, careful consideration
Yeah,
and really innovative solution.
for sure. Yeah, it's like, we want this flexibility, but we also want to be able to, move up in our careers.
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost like there's this hurdle for
Yeah.
remote workers to get over.
And it can feel even higher
Right.
if the company isn't actively trying to level that playing field.
Right. But, it sounds like at least
Yeah,
there is some awareness of this issue.
there is.
Our companies, are they taking this seriously?
I think they are.
Okay.
I think more and more organizations are starting to realize
Yeah.
that they need to adapt
Yeah.
their practices to make sure it's fair.
Okay, so what can companies do then to address this bias?
Well, one key thing is to kind of move away from those traditional performance reviews
Mm-hmm.
that really rely heavily on subjective assessments.
Yeah.
Or, anecdotal
You
evidence.
mean like gut feeling?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
They need to develop ways to measure contributions and potential,
That are more objective.
more objective
Okay.
and data-driven.
So less, I feel like this person's doing a good job, and more like,
Right.
here's the data.
Here's the proof.
Okay.
Yeah. And that might mean
Yeah.
tracking things like
Mm-hmm.
project outcomes, individual contributions to team goals,
Yeah.
or even, the impact someone's work has on key business metrics.
So we're really shifting away from how much are they in the office to
Right.
what are they actually doing?
Yeah, exactly.
But data can't tell the whole story, right?
No, it can't.
I mean, there's got to be
There's a human element there.
a human element. Yeah.
And that's why it's so important for managers to be trained
Yeah.
on how to recognize and mitigate
Their own biases.
their own biases. Yeah.
Yeah.
They need to be aware of this, potential for proximity bias
Mm-hmm.
and really make an effort to learn about the contributions of their remote team members.
So even if they're not seeing them every day,
Yeah.
they've got to make sure
They have to.
they understand what those people are doing.
Yeah. And that might involve,
Yeah.
setting up regular check-ins
Okay.
with those remote employees.
Yeah.
Proactively seeking their input on projects.
Okay.
Or even, using technology to kind of
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
track their contributions and their progress
Mm-hmm.
in a way that's more transparent.
So it sounds like, to make this whole hybrid thing work,
Mm-hmm.
we need a shift in mindset
Right.
for both.
Both companies
The companies.
and the individuals.
Yeah.
Companies got to rethink
Mm-hmm.
how they handle performance management.
Yeah.
And individuals, especially remote workers, have got to be proactive,
About communicating.
communicating their value,
Yeah.
making sure that their contributions are recognized.
It's a two-way street.
It is.
So
What are we taking away from all this?
I think, the key takeaway here is
Yeah.
don't let location
Right.
define your potential.
Right.
Be proactive, communicate your value, and don't be afraid to advocate for yourself.
And for the companies out there,
Mm-hmm.
you need to create a system
Mm-hmm.
that recognizes and rewards contributions,
Yes.
not just, are you here?
Exactly.
Are you in the office?
Right.
So this has been, a really interesting deep dive. It is.
And I feel like we've really uncovered some important challenges.
It's a fascinating time
Yeah.
to be working.
And, with all these changes,
Mm-hmm.
we've got to adapt and evolve.
And I think by acknowledging these challenges
Yeah.
and working together to find solutions,
Mm-hmm.
we can create a future of work that's both flexible and fair.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Awesome.
So, thanks for joining us today for this deep dive. We'll see you next time.